Off air. Oh,
Welcome. We are live to another episode of the TechForge podcast. I believe this is episode 28.
Yep.
does this go in the nose?
I generally don't think so.
That?
Well, you have to ask Kyle from Bitwit because he put a screwdriver up his nose.
That sounds painful.
Potentially, yes.
You'd have to check CES to see if he did it.
Oh, I'm going to have to check CES.
And we're already off the rails. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host for the evening, Ned, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-hosts, Jason and Hunter.
Oh, hi.
All right. Well, tonight we're going to focus on one big topic for the evening, and that's going to be the NVIDIA Adaptive Sync update that released just a couple of days ago when we're recording this, that enables all NVIDIA graphics cards to be compatible with FreeSync monitors, or excuse me, NVIDIA would prefer I use the term adaptive sync monitors.
Did you say adaptive sync?
Nope.
No, I'm pretty sure I said adaptive.
He said adaptive.
Adaptive.
But let's face it, they're basically FreeSync monitors. That's how they're marketed. That's how everyone's going to remember it.
Yep.
And so now apparently G-Sync will now work on FreeSync monitors.
So they freed the G-Sync.
Exactly.
Kind
Well, kind of. But they were also kind of deceptive in the way they did it, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We have a few other more pressing bits of tech news that we want to get to first.
Well, of course they were. They're NVIDIA.
And speaking of NVIDIA, the first one is a rumor from Tom's Hardware, although it's been literally all over the internet at this point since the original rumor released from Video Card Z. Is apparently the existence of a GeForce GTX 1660 Ti graphics card.
What?
If this rumor is to be believed, the GeForce GTX 1660 Ti is reportedly the first Turing product to be released on the TU-116 die. And apparently this is going to be a slightly cut down version of the TU-106 die that is on the RTX 2060. However, it will feature none of the ray tracing features, hence why it is being marketed as a GTX 1660.
Oh, GTX.
And so, according to the original leak from Video Card Z, I know technically they want that said Video Cards, but it just doesn't sound right to me.
I hear you.
The 1660 Ti will feature 1,536 CUDA cores, 120 texture units, 6 gigabytes of GDDR6, and 192-bit memory interface with 14 rasterization operation processors. Which, if that sounds familiar, that's because that's basically identical to the RTX 2060, except there are fewer CUDA cores.
2060 has 19... Oh, yeah. Right.
Yep. The RTX 2060 has 1920 CUDA cores, whereas the 1660 Ti will apparently have 1536.
Yeah.
But otherwise will be identical.
Well, I want to say performance estimation is probably going to be right around, if you're going to try and guesstimate what or visualize what the performance would be like, it would be like right around a GTX 1070, I think. Because the IPC on Turing is actually better than Pascal.
And honestly, that wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, they don't want to undercut sales of their brand new RTX 2060.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't blame him.
But you know, there was that rumor a few weeks ago of the GTX 1160, and it looks like this may be along that same vein.
Well, from what I read, it is the official or possibly official name is either the 1160 or the 1660 Ti.
Oh, okay.
So it's one source, two sources had 1160, one source had 1660 Ti.
Gotcha. Wouldn't surprise me. Wonder what they're waiting on.
They probably want to get. If I had to guess, they probably want to get the RTX 2060 out into the channel, and
that's right.
Sales for it kind of get percolating.
Yep, I would say the same thing.
And plus, they're probably waiting for the last little bit of 10 series inventory to finally filter out of the channel, because, well, part of his announcement of the RTX 2060, as he was speaking to some of the tech press afterward at CES, Jensen Huang let it slip that 10 series supply is being depleted. Of course, I say let it slip, but I'm sure it was pretty strategic on his part to encourage, buy our 20 series cards. The 10 series cards are almost gone.
Or get them while they're still there.
So, to be honest, when I first heard this, I was of the opinion that there's no way NVIDIA will undercut their own RTX 2060 sales. But since it's going to have fewer CUDA cores, it's not going to perform quite as well. And the naming scheme is what gets me.
Yeah.
Calling a 60 part that is lesser than its non-TI counterpart a TI card is completely against everything NVIDIA has done before.
Well, so is releasing a 60 part at $350 to $450.
Well, the thing is, whenever NVIDIA in the past has released a cut down part, they've always called it an SE.
Right.
I remember because when I was shopping for my GTX 460, I had to make sure I didn't accidentally buy one of the SE parts way back in the day.
Or MX used to be their value. Special edition. It's special, all right.
So I don't know if I buy the TI branding, but everything else looks pretty solid.
The thing that weirds me out is calling it a 1600, a 1660. Makes me think of the 660 Ti. But then, like, you're throwing off your naming scheme, like going from 10 series to 20 series, and there's like this random 1660 part.
You know, we're seeing 1160 and 1660 Ti. It really wouldn't surprise me if this part winds up being the GTX 2050.
Yeah, maybe. That's what they were. Yeah,
or maybe the 2050 Ti.
That's what I was wondering, if they were going to do a 2050 and 2050 Ti. I would rather them do a 2050 Ti
than this weird 1660 Ti thing.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be a little disappointed if they didn't have 30 different, 60 level SKUs to expand on what they did with Pascal.
But the good thing about the 1660 Ti is the people who don't want ray tracing because it's too expensive, there's the 1660 Ti.
Yeah.
It doesn't have ray tracing.
Or an RX 580.
Yeah. People save money. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw a Radeon wrench in there. You're welcome.
I mean, in some games, the RX 580 is better than the 1060.
Actually, quite a few games now. Now that the drivers are maturing,
Yeah.
I'm starting to see some benchmarks where the RX 570 is nearly at parity or slightly better than some variants of the 1060.
So this would probably be a fight between the RX 590 and the 1660 Ti.
Oh, well, maybe.
Yeah, if the 1660 Ti is supposed to perform roughly on the level of a 1070, then the RX 590 would be the most direct AMD competitor, because the Vega 56 was more aimed at the 1070 Ti 1080.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole reason the 1070 Ti exists is because of Vega 56.
Yeah.
Because the Vega 56 could, even with its early drivers, was able to handily beat the 1070.
Yep.
And so, on from that speculation to slightly different speculation, although I think to call this speculation isn't really right. It's just, this is another really odd move by Intel. And that is that Intel is possibly readying a Core i9-9990XE processor.
What socket is that thing supposed to fit in?
This is a 2066 processor, so this is supposed to fit in the Skylake X lineup.
Oh, okay. That's a slightly bigger socket, I think, than 1150 blah.
And so the 9990XE will apparently feature up to 14 cores that will turbo to 5.0 gigahertz. Anyone want to take a random guess at the TDP for this thing?
Well, I mean, you've got 255 listed there.
300?
Right? I'm guessing it'd be a lot more than that in actual practice, though.
Well, the rated TDP is 255 watts for a 14-core part that has a 5.0 gigahertz boost clock.
So to put that into perspective, what's the TDP on the 2990WX? Where is that? I saw that somewhere.
I don't remember offhand, but for reference, the base clock of this 9990XE is 4.0 gigahertz, which is a full gigahertz over the 9980XE.
That's crazy.
And a boost clock of 5 gigahertz, which is 500 megahertz faster than the 9980XE. Of course, it is running with 4 fewer cores than the 9980XE, which is probably how they're able to do 5 gigahertz at all.
Yeah.
But you still have a jump of 90 watts in TDP.
Okay, so the 2990WX, what is it? 32 core, 64 thread. That's 250 watt TDP.
Okay, so this is using roughly the same power as a 32 core chip from AMD.
Right. And
it only has 14 cores.
Right.
Admittedly, 14 blazing fast cores.
Yeah, that's true. That thing, it'll cook your eggs and it'll get you 300 FPS at 8K resolutions. So, yeah.
The interesting thing about this chip, though, the thing that is probably most odd about it, is that apparently this is considered an off-roadmap chip that will only be available to OEM manufacturers via auction.
Why would they do that?
Well, according to a non-tech who originally released this.
It's so odd. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Intel said this. At first, they said they didn't have a comment. But then afterward, they said this. The Core i9-9990XE is designed specifically for the financial services industry because of specific customer requirements. Because the 9990XE was built with unique specification and high frequency to meet the workload needs of this targeted industry, it can only be produced in limited quantities and will not be broadly made available. The part will be offered through an auction to ensure fairness in supply distribution. So apparently this is going to be an extremely low volume part.
It's basically a supercharged variant of their $1,300 processor, their 9940X.
Correct.
Huh. Cache is to be determined, but it's probably going to be 19 or 20 megs or something.
Yeah, the fact that this is only going to be sold once a quarter by auction to a specific set of OEMs, which, based on their sources, apparently in the first round of auctions, which are supposed to take place, they say in the third week of 2019, which means sometime next week.
What's it going to be, gold-plated? Is it going to be sold in between, like, you know, some 40-year-old classic car and some crazy painting that's super rare and ultra valuable?
Who knows at this point? I mean, I get having a Halo product that has very specific use cases. Fine, I get that.
Yeah.
But why, Intel? Why?
Well, they're struggling to find an identity for HEDT now. Now that Ryzen has forced their mainstream SKUs to up core count, and that now that they have Threadripper, that's a serious competitor to HEDT, their use case pretty much is lots of cores and threads at much higher clock speeds than Threadripper. But beyond that, I mean, they don't really have much of an advantage. You know what I mean?
What really gets me is this comment that a non-tech makes. Motherboard vendors will have to support 420 amps of power delivery for the chip, which at 1.3 volts could pull up to 546 watts.
Jeez. Golly.
And up
That's
to
crazy.
30 amps per core.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, their TDP ratings are kind of silly, but that doesn't surprise me at all. You imagine what kind of VRM those motherboards should have?
Oh, yeah. I imagine there will be more than a few system integrators who put them in boards that they just wind up melting through.
Bigger than Vega. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
And Vega, I mean...
If Vega is a power black hole, then this is a supermassive one.
Yeah, this is bigger than Vega. This needs a bigger VRM than Vega. And, you know, Vega, for all intents and purposes, it can be very well tamed and only eat 200 watts of power, give you great performance, or it can be a crazy, you know, black hole of power consumption and give you an unbelievable performance, but you're eating 500 watts of power. So I can't imagine that, man. That's insane for a CPU.
Yeah, the idea of a CPU by itself drawing, and if it's 255 watts TDP, you're not cooling that with an ordinary cooling solution. You're not just slapping a heatsink on that and calling it a day.
Hey.
You would need, so 500 watts. You would need roughly 480 millimeters of radiator.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
But remember, this is supposed to be designed for the financial sector, and they're probably not going to be water cooling their CPUs. if
No,
they're
because
putting it in a traditional rack.
oh my gosh, they would use an air cooler.
Hmm?
I mean,
I'm
they
not sure
make
what
them.
racks use.
Yeah,
It would really depend on the type of system this wound up in.
Mhm.
yeah. They would have to make an air cooler powerful enough for that.
Some of the Noctua TR4 style coolers probably would be able to handle it.
I don't
Although,
know. No, you'd need bigger than that Noctua thing, man.
Wait, would Intel make a stock heatsink like that, like they do with their?
They would outsource it. You know what I mean?
Mm,
They'd
well,
outsource it to a boutique.
one of the specific things they mention is that this is being offered with no warranty. So,
A $2,000 product SKU with no warranty.
that's awesome.
That's so odd. Although everything about this thing is odd.
mm-hmm.
I don't get it. I don't understand it. You know what's scary though? That TDP rating of 255 watts, that's not too far off from 9900K actual power consumption.
That's true.
Seriously, it's not. Because even with a 360 mil radiator, in some cases, that 9900K gets pretty toasty. And that's just running stock boost settings, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, with the motherboard vendors, nice little additions in BIOS to, up the performance, but still. Yeah, that's insane.
Speaking of moves that don't make any sense, apparently, Sapphire has decided that GPU crypto mining is going to make a comeback. And so they've introduced a 16 gigabyte Radeon RX 570. Because that totally makes sense.
It's making a comeback. It really is, even though it's not, but it is.
Some of it depends on what coin that you're talking about making a comeback. Because some coins are making a comeback. I mean, Litecoin went up for like a week and then went down again.
Well, yeah, some of the altcoins are still viable, but most of the main ones, Bitcoin hasn't been viable for years with GPU mining.
Yeah.
Litecoin hasn't in the past several months. Monero and Zcash largely aren't anymore.
And Ethereum is still not really worth it. Well, I mean, at least investing in it. I don't know about mining.
Well, Ethereum was supposed to have that code built into it, supposedly, that made it harder to mine on specific ASICs. Which was why supposedly GPU mining was more desirable for Ethereum. But given that there are ASICs out on the market for Ethereum at this point, I think we can safely discard that theory.
Yeah. And based on the Ethereum investing market, like Coinbase, it's at 122. It used to be like 400 something. At least like several months ago, it was like at 450, I think. So it's going downhill. So I don't see mining being profitable enough for my research into it.
I don't know. I'll just be praying that that it doesn't come back, because that's the last thing we need right now.
Yeah.
Apparently,
go ahead.
The coin that Sapphire is betting their money on is a new cryptocurrency called GRIN, GRIN. And the quote from the company's vice president of global marketing is, Although GPU mining will eventually tail off, there's a tremendous opportunity for first movers to take advantage of the high rewards from early mining, just as long as you have the right hardware, which of course he's saying this 16 gigabyte RX 570 is. So,
well, it's kind of, I mean, 570's got really good compute. It's very power friendly, and most of the mining software out there runs really well on GDDR5, and it's a very large buffer of it, so it's kind of tailor-made for it.
And so, if you really want to get into crypto mining, I guess this thing is out there. If you want an RX 570 with so much VRAM it doesn't know what to do with it, I guess that technically exists. Because
that's technically right too, man.
Because I mean, even the 8 gig frame buffer that you find on some RX 570s, most of the time at the resolutions it's capable of rendering at, you're not going to use it all.
Yep, that's very true.
But if that particular Radeon GPU does not get your blood flowing, then how about this? This is from overclock3d.net. Navi rumored to launch in June with high-end models coming later this year.
Huh. From what I've heard, higher-end models weren't expected to come until 2020. Now, that's interesting. I think Navi's going to be pretty good. From a price to performance perspective, it's going to be, I'm hoping, it should be pretty power friendly too.
Well, what we do know about Navi, this is coming from Red Gaming Tech. AMD's Navi architecture should launch in June, with graphics card releasing about a month later, placing the architecture's launch within the time frame of both Computex and E3 2019. And it would make sense that if, from what we know, Navi was supposedly used in both the upcoming Sony PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Next, which apparently is the name being used.
Has that been confirmed?
Well, it's interesting that Microsoft made a big deal about talking about their next generation Xbox at CES 2019 as part of the CES 2019 keynote for AMD.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that the CPU has been pretty well leaked, as being a Ryzen variant for the next Microsoft Xbox, but I still wasn't sure about Navi though.
Well, and the benchmarks, the specs for the PlayStation 5 I saw did say an AMD APU with Navi in it.
And so the reason I say it would make sense is that if AMD did release something about Navi at Computex, that would be just before the big announcement of the next generation Xbox, which Phil Spencer kind of already talked about.
Yep.
At E3.
Ah, okay. Well, you gotta hand this to AMD. I mean, they have not done well in the graphics sector. It's kind of their own fault, even though they release good products, in my opinion. But what they're doing is they're offloading a lot of that R&D cost to Microsoft and Sony. But they work so well in tandem with them, in partnership with them on these projects, that it's mutually beneficial for both, right? So my hat's really off to AMD, the way they've the way they've come around and they're able to manage themselves, at least from that standpoint.
I mean, it's no surprise to me that with Lisa Su having a background in semi-custom CPU and GPU designs, that she would set the company on a path that would utilize semi-custom work like for the Xbox, for the PlayStation, and would leverage it in that way.
Well, look at what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
She's really turned that company around, man.
Yep.
My hat's off to her, dude. They've come out of nowhere. So, yeah, I don't know, man.
Well, if you were unimpressed with the release of the Radeon 7, or excuse me, the announcement of the Radeon 7 at CES with its impending release on February 7th, then maybe you don't have that long to wait if we're going to see an announcement in June with a release sometime in July.
Oh, Radeon, so yeah. Or with Navi. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
It's late.
That's all right. Okay. And this, I think, is a really good bit of news. This comes from DRAM Exchange, which is based on some information they received from TrendForce, which is a market analysis website. Expect a sharper decline of nearly 20% in first quarter 19 DRAM market.
Oh, yeah. I read about this the other day. I was really surprised to see that estimation. Go ahead.
So what TrendForce is estimating is that prices of DRAM products will trend downward up to 20% during the first quarter of 2019. And given how high DDR4 RAM prices have been for so long, admittedly, they've gotten much better than they used to be.
Yeah.
To see a further 20% drop-off would be quite impressive. I mean, right now, if you're willing to pick around the deals, it's fairly easy to find 16 gigs of DDR4 at good speeds of, say, 3,000 or 3,200 from anywhere between $90 to $110.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can expect those prices to fall an additional 20%, it could almost get as good as it was when I bought my first set of DDR4 in 2016, where I managed to pick up a 16 gig set of DDR4 2400 for $65.
Yeah.
It's getting to that point. I mean, the last time we saw 16 gigs of 3,000, 3,200 speed RAM kits for $95 roughly is, I want to say, probably November-ish of 2017, like right before it just ballooned and went crazy. So, I mean, cheaper RAM, man, that for having to endure what we've had to endure, that's amazing.
Well, right now on Newegg, there is a set of DDR4 2666. It's G.Skill Aegis memory that is on sale for $85.
Not bad.
If you're talking about DDR4 3000, there is a set of G.Skill Aegis for $93. A set of Ripjaws 5 for $95. DDR3 4000 or 3000. But if you want to go much faster than 3000, you're going to spend significantly more. The cheapest I can find that's DDR 3200. I just limited to 3200. Yeah, the cheapest set of 3200 on PC Part Picker is $120.
That's not bad, though.
But if you're willing to go down to DDR4 3000, you can get it as cheap as $93 to $99.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
And so if we can expect a 20% drop off from even those prices, that's hard to complain about.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because sometimes what follows with the RAM pricing is flash memory or SSD pricing as well. So they're made on the same fabs, right? So
we will have to see.
Not bad.
Oh. All right. Now, this last one is a overclocking showdown between the new RTX 2060, its predecessor, the GTX 1070 Ti, and of course, its closest AMD rival, the RX Vega 56.
Yep, from Babbletech Tech Reviews. Yep.
Indeed. And so we'll provide the link to this because this is a rather extensive set of charts. But suffice it to say, it's the RTX 2060 against its major competitors apparently wins more benchmarks than it loses. And this was not an insignificant number of benchmarks.
No, it was really impressive, the amount of work that they put into this, because when you read the testing methodology and how they overclocked the cards, they did a very good job, and they provide screenshots of how they overclock. So go ahead.
But is this RTX on or off?
Oh, it's off. It's off, dude.
Yeah, it would have to be. I'm just making a joke.
Oh.
Yeah. We know of course, if RTX was on, we know the numbers would all be half of what's shown there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, having had both the 1070 Ti and now having this Vega 56 overclocked, these numbers are very, very close.
So does that mean that with the Vega 56 price and the 1070 Ti being $350, I'm guessing the Vega 56 is also around $350. So then $350 for an RTX 2060 is not far-fetched?
Well, so I've got my own opinions on a 60 level part at $350 to $450. But it is showing that the 2060 is offering the same level of performance. And in some cases, it's actually slightly better, but it's all in the same ballpark. I mean,
but you can basically say it's a rebrand. It's like a rebrand of the 2070 Ti, 1070 Ti. Excuse me.
Well, in terms of raw performance, kind of, yeah. Now the issue is it only has a 6 gig frame buffer. So there are going to be situations in games at 1440p and in a couple of cases at 1080p where the extra 2 gigs on the, say, a Vega 56 or 1070 Ti will actually let those parts outperform the 2060. But for the most part, the 2060 is slightly faster. I hate to say it, but it is.
And the problem for me, I kind of get what NVIDIA is trying to do. What they're trying to do is they're attempting to realign their product stack. What they're trying to do is, hey, the performance you used to associate with a 70 level card, we want you to associate that with a 60 level card now. And so because you associate 70 level price with a 60 level card now, we want you to pay a 70 level price for it, which is not illegitimate. It just feels scummy.
It is scummy,
Yeah.
man. It is scummy that they can do that because they don't have any competition. They don't have anybody else in the market with similar parts that can say, no, you're not doing this.
Yeah.
They have the mind share. So they can do this. They can get away with this. So they are.
I think you're right, Jason. I think the critical problem with the RTX 2060 is that frame buffer, and I think that's going to come back and bite NVIDIA in the rear. Because
go ahead.
Because the 6 gig frame buffer is already an issue for the 1060 in some games.
And that's 1080p, man.
Perfect example. I was watching a video from Hardware Unboxed today where they were comparing the 1063 gig versus the RX 574 gig versus the RX 580 8 gig versus the 1066 gig.
Yep.
And the one that stood out to me, the one benchmark he did that really stood out to me, was when he talked about Rainbow Six Siege when you disable the resolution scaling and set it to 100%. Suddenly, the game becomes a massive VRAM hog and uses over 6 gigabytes of VRAM. And when you do that, you watch the GTX 1060's performance suffer significantly compared to its RX counterparts.
Well, yeah, it has to go to the cache levels that are provided by the system to cache those extra textures, right? So it's putting that out to RAM at that point. So, yeah.
And that's why I think the 6 gig VRAM buffer on the RTX 2060 is probably a long-term mistake. Unless NVIDIA is planning for this product cycle to be a shortened one.
So there's some interesting takeaways from the RTX product stack. When you look at the part numbers associated with the actual GPUs, the GPU that is in the 2060, when you look at past product stacks, so if you look at Pascal, for example, the numbering convention of the Pascal GPUs, so the 1050 used a specific number for their GPU. That numbering convention is the same that's on the 2060. And the same with the 1060 numbering scheme is the same as what is on the 2070. So, and then when you look at the architecture, how it seems to probably have been tailor-made for a smaller processing node. For example, it's on 12 nanometer, I think now, but and these are huge monolithic dies. I want to say, to me, this design seemed to be made for either 10 or 7 nanometer, and with all of these numbering conventions, the 2060 part really is a 2050. The 2070 is really a 2060. So, so when you think about that, in my mind, and the pricing that they're asking for, makes me slightly more irritated.
Well, it's like I said, again, this is my speculation, my conjecture based on what I'm seeing and based on NVIDIA's behavior when it comes to the RTX series. I honestly think RTX 20 series is the transitional. It's a transitional series of GPUs.
Oh, yeah.
This is designed to get the tech out there, to make it available to developers. They have enough of a lead. They know that they can potentially sacrifice this generation for, all the issues they've been having with ray tracing. They know they are unopposed, and their GPUs cannot be matched by anything their competitors can put out. And so it would not surprise me to see RTX have a relatively short life compared to Pascal and Maxwell. And we see an RTX 3000 series in, say, a year or so on a much smaller node, say 7 nanometers.
It'll be 7. It'll be 10 or 7. I want to say it's going to be 10, probably. It could be 7.
See it on a much smaller node with, commensurate improvements in performance.
It kind of makes me sick a little bit because they can get away with this, and they're treating gamers are what keep the lights on for NVIDIA. It's not the data sector. It's not miners. It's gamers. It's always been gamers. It still is gamers. Yet, looking at what they're doing, they're pricing these cards at outrageous prices. And I just don't like what they're doing. I used to love NVIDIA, man.
Mm-hmm.
I had a 770. I had a 1060. I had a 1070 Ti even. And just looking at what they're doing with RTX, it makes me sick.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can say is probably kind of acceptable is 2080 Ti at $1,300. Okay, that's fine. That's the fastest 4K card in the world, right? Okay, that's fine. That's kind of a boutique card, but 2080 at $800, $700, I don't know what it is. Ah, come on. That's a $500 part, and it's $800. It's ridiculous. They're taking advantage of gamers. But you know what? Gamers buy the stuff. So the unfortunate thing about that is that AMD is a company too, right? They're out to make money. And with RTX being at these ridiculous prices, they're legitimizing these different market segments. So when Navi comes out, I want to see them do with Navi like they do with Ryzen, where they came out with 8 cores at half the price. And they just totally disrupted everything. They could do that, and that's probably what they need to do to get mind share. Just totally disrupt the market. Flip it upside down, man. They have the capacity to do that with Navi, but I don't know.
I think a lot of people were expecting a better price on Radeon 7. Because whatever you may think of Radeon 7, it's a 7 nanometer Vega part. And with that HBM2 memory on board, it's going to be expensive to manufacture.
Well, it's a consumer variant of the, what was that? The Frontier Edition M60 or whatever that thing is.
The Radeon Instinct MI60.
Yeah. That's it. That's all it is.
And given that there is some evidence that it can take up to $650 in components for the Radeon 7, the fact they're selling at $699, they're probably just barely making margin on these things.
I've read where it's estimated that they're taking a slight loss on each one. I've read that they're barely breaking even, or maybe, like you're saying, slightly making a little bit. I'm not sure why they're doing that.
Well, there was the story a little while ago when one of the high-level CEOs at AMD left, that apparently Radeon 7 had been one of his babies, and it was a legacy project that had to be seen through fruition and had to be released.
Okay. So they had already made a commitment, so they're just, well, I mean, on the one hand, they are kind of making a statement. You know, they're saying, well, we can still compete on the high end.
Even if it
Right.
isn't against the like of the 2080 Ti. Although I really wish we had seen Radeon 7, say, a year ago when Vega came out.
Well, Vega came out August 2017.
If they had been able to put out something with the performance of Radeon 7, it would have traded blows and possibly beaten the 1080 Ti.
I would say yes, it would have beaten the 2080 or the 1080 Ti. I'm fairly confident it would have, yeah.
It trades blows with the RTX 2080.
Right.
And the RTX 2080 performs very similarly to the 1080 Ti.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're seeing is just a little bit of too little too late.
Yeah, I think Vega, unfortunately, has been a disappointment for them. And it goes back to their release of it. You know, when you couldn't find them at all, and they weren't at the MSRP that they'd stated they would be at. So, you know, you can make fun of the power consumption and all that stuff, and it's not that bad. It really isn't. You can tune your Vega 56 to be down around 200 to 220 watts of power, and still give great performance. But it all comes back to not being able to find Vega 56s at $400 at launch.
Because
that's what started it all right there.
Because crypto.
Yeah.
Isn't that what it always comes back to? Because crypto.
Because crypto. Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, I know you guys are probably sick of hearing me say it, but I love my Vega, man. That's the reason I sold the 1070 Ti right there. It's a better part than the 1070 Ti. I will stand by that. But
well,
I don't know. Is what it is.
Well, as much as we enjoy discussing Radeon and discussing what could be and what could have been with Navi and Vega, the main thing we want to talk about this evening, or the big topic, and I have to give many thanks to Hunter on this because he did a lot of legwork on this.
Yeah, great job, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah, it bugged it bugged me a lot, so I had to do that.
And that is one of the big announcements at CES 2019 was NVIDIA announcing that they were going to support VESA Adaptive Sync, which is basically NVIDIA's way of getting around saying FreeSync monitors as, quote, G-Sync compatible. And so NVIDIA, with the release of driver 417.71, which released on January 15th, enabled G-Sync on FreeSync monitors. And although they tested over 400 of these monitors, they declared 12 of them to be compatible at their quality standards. However, they enabled an option in the NVIDIA driver that if you have a FreeSync monitor and it is not one of the 12 validated monitors, that you can still enable G-Sync through FreeSync on that panel with no guarantees about whether it'll work or not.
And it'll mark in the NVIDIA control panel, it'll give a warning, selected display is not validated as G-Sync, but G-Sync compatible. But they say you can try it. If it works, it works. If it's not validated that it works and it works, good. There you go.
And so I imagine this was especially important for you, Hunter, because of the three of us, you're the one who uses an NVIDIA GPU in his daily driver machine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it bugged me a lot, because I've been wanting to get to experience. I have a 1080p 60 hertz monitor and a 27-inch, which is nice. But I've been really, really wanting to get into experiencing at least maybe 1080p 144 hertz, but at least 144 hertz gaming, because I have a 1070. I have my current 1070 is the blower style, which is only for my sleeper build, but I have a 1070 for the win, which is factory overclocked. So it should be able to do where everything I read, it can do 1440p 144 hertz, or even just 1080p 144 hertz. But the cheapest G-Sync monitor was like maybe around 400 or a little less than 400. I'm like, but that's only for a 24-inch. I would like to have a 27-inch and not pay $500. So this was a big deal for me, because they are FreeSync monitors that are compatible enough, as long as it meets the special settings and like low input lag between the mouse click and the action on the screen, which I understand, and the backlight, which I've looked at videos and like, yeah, that makes sense. Has a powerful enough backlight to show lighting in games versus having games be dark in the background for just FreeSync or even low quality FreeSync monitor. And I wanted to know if this was valid for me. So I created a list of looking at the 12 compatible recommended monitors from NVIDIA. And I got their screen sizes, resolution, refresh rate, which of course is 144 hertz, but there were one or two 240 hertz monitors and three 240 hertz monitors and one 75 hertz monitor. And the only prices I could find for them were mostly on Amazon, and a few of them were on Newegg, and some of them were not listed on Newegg. So I made this list. Some of them weren't listed on Newegg.
There's some interesting price disparities here, man.
Yeah.
Like that Acer XFA 240.
Yeah.
$200 on Amazon, but it's $348 on Newegg.
It's probably because it's being sold through a third-party seller.
Yeah. That's what I marked on.
Kind of weird.
Yeah. That's what I marked on the Acer XZ321Q. Is I marked it on the Newegg column, not sold by Newegg, because that was rated. That's a 1080p monitor, and that was being sold at $899 by not Newegg, by some random person on Newegg. Like, that's insane.
Speaking of which, let me share this list so that all of our viewing audience can see it.
It's a good idea.
So this is the list that you compiled, Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
You can see there, like was said, there is some interesting price disparity.
Yeah.
So, in particular, of these, which are the ones that interest you the most, Hunter?
I've looked at it. I've gone to Best Buy. This is the closest electronics store to me. So I've looked at a 24-inch monitor that they have there, and I've seen my 27-inch monitor. I don't think that 3 inches really matters. If I was going to actually replace my 1080p 60 hertz monitor, because I'd have to move some stuff around to get another 27-inch monitor, I would like to go with the, where was it? I would do the second one listed, because it's not a preferable price, but the Newegg price is a little $20 cheaper. Or where was it? No, it's not really. I mean, if I had to do a 24-inch because of price, it depends on how much I can save up at a certain point. It really just depends on whenever I feel like buying a monitor. There was one that was a 2K that was $200, or I could even do the 25-inch 2K monitor, 75 hertz, which is, I don't know.
Yeah, the problem is, at least in my experience, with the 75 hertz monitors, 75 hertz doesn't give you a whole lot of additional range over a 60 hertz monitor.
So really, at a quick buy, it would be a 24-inch monitor. And of course, a quick buy would be a 24-inch 1080p 144 hertz monitor. I've read online a lot because I've done a lot of research on which one to get. Most people who have G-Sync monitors say that it's best to game on a 1440p G-Sync monitor, because you get, of course, more real estate, whatever screen size you can get, but the resolution is better for gaming. Especially, it's more enjoyable at 144 hertz to have a 2K versus a 1K of 1080p. But I'd probably just save up and go with the XG270HU, because it's
all right.
It's really just like the only one really I see that fits everything that I'm looking for, with a decent enough. The price is more like, it's definitely around the price of a 24-inch G-Sync monitor. So G-Sync only.
Good to know.
That's fair.
And something interesting I found while I was looking for more information about this for the show was, apparently NVIDIA announced yesterday, January the 16th, that they will not be supporting G-Sync compatible displays on pre-Pascal GPUs.
Yeah.
So if you're using a Maxwell GPU, like a GTX 700 series or older, then too bad, G-Sync compatible displays will not work with your card. So if you were hoping to get a little more, just a little bit more life out of your 700 series card that way, sorry, that's not going to work for you.
Well, they've got a reputation to uphold. They've got to gimp the old cards.
Yeah.
With their new driver updates.
And that goes back to the fight of, if you have an RX paired with a FreeSync monitor, it's still relatively cheaper. Depends on what RX card and what monitor resolution and everything. But from everything I've seen, is relatively cheaper.
Well, if you're looking purely at performance and value, you can't make much of a case for Vega 56 versus 2060.
Yeah.
But you can make a case for 590, 580, 570.
Yeah.
You can make very valid cases for those cards.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the fact that Maxwell and the 900 series is getting left out in the cold here is somewhat disappointing. But
I'd agree.
But on the other hand, got to push those sales of the RTX cards.
Yep. And gotta get the series out.
Got to make your 60% profit margin.
Yep.
And so one thing that I noticed, and this did not escape Tim from Hardware Unboxed either when he saw the announcement, was how NVIDIA positioned this G-Sync compatible as somehow lesser. That, oh, FreeSync doesn't work. FreeSync is broken. It leads to these problems with these displays. And I really liked in his video, which we did include in the links on the One Tab page, and that Hunter did point out here, is that this is just NVIDIA blatantly lying about their competition.
Mm-hmm.
Because they did show on the display floor at CES some displays that had issues with G-Sync via FreeSync, but that wasn't a problem due to FreeSync. That was because these displays are known to have these issues even with Radeon GPUs when you enable FreeSync on certain games. The flickering, the black screening, that type of thing. And so I'm glad you included this video from Hardware Unboxed. We're not going to show it here because we don't want to get demonetized. Just Tim's done some excellent work here. He tested it against all 5 of the FreeSync displays that he had on hand to test it with, and he ran into no issues. They all worked perfectly, and none of them are G-Sync compatible validated displays. Now, that doesn't mean you won't run into one that has a problem, but I think NVIDIA, perhaps somewhat intentionally, overblew the problem.
Yeah, see, I had issue with it being like have to match, for them to validate it, it has to match their quality setting, their quality standards. Because to me, their quality standards, while possibly being valid, makes most of the monitors expensive. I mean, that one monitor that I saw, well, having a 240 hertz on a 1080p, that was insane to me, finding that out. But
they exist,
and that's $599. That's insane to me. But I mean, even with the 1440p 27-inch being $500, that's about, I think that's around the same price as what the G-Sync was. Because it was $500 or $600, depends on what make it was. I mean, who made it? Because like I said, the cheapest G-Sync at the time, G-Sync monitor was a 2400 Dell monitor. No, a 24-inch Dell monitor that was like $380, which I still thought was insane.
Right.
So these 12, while at least one of them, the 25-inch 1080p being $200 on Amazon, that's actually pretty nice. That's probably one of the best ones you can find.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I mean, I know, and even before this came out, there was only one monitor one non G-Sync monitor that you could buy until NVIDIA stopped it. You can buy the G-Sync circuit board and take the back of the Asus monitor, 24-inch Asus monitor off, and then put the G-Sync circuit board on and make it a G-Sync monitor. But I've looked into that too before they stopped it, and that was also expensive because I think it was $200 or more for the circuit board, and the monitor itself was like $280. I'm like, what's the point?
Well,
yeah, the only reason that would have made sense is if you'd already purchased the monitor and you wanted to add G-Sync compatibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, salty business practices aside, if you look at this purely from a marketing perspective, it's pretty clever.
Oh yeah, makes total sense.
Positioning G-Sync as the premium option, which I think most enthusiasts do understand it. It is a little better. But it's just from a value perspective, it's nowhere near the same value that FreeSync gives you. It's free.
Yeah.
But just purely from a marketing perspective, it's very clever.
I mean,
another lesson learned for AMD, right? So
yeah, this was a bit of an unforced error on their part.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at a LAN party, I don't know, 6 or more months ago, and a friend of mine, built a computer with an RX 580 and had a FreeSync monitor, and it looked great. Like, there was no issues.
Mm-hmm.
It looked fine. And I went from I did have not a Radeon. Well, Radeon HD 7870 was the last Radeon card I had. And I jumped to the GTX 760, and then from that, I mainly went to the 960 because, one, it was on sale, and two, it was boasting like better cooling options and quieter, and it was great. So basically, you just have to find out what's the frustrating thing for me is finding out what factors I want to go with in a graphics card or monitor versus not being able to be satisfied with everything.
Right.
Yeah, it's good that NVIDIA is finally seeing the light that with FreeSync being supported in TVs and a huge number of displays, I think they had to acknowledge that, yeah, G-Sync is never going to get the wide adoption that FreeSync is, and so we have to do something to hitch our bandwagon to this.
Yeah.
And so I think they are making the best they can out of what was an increasingly poor situation for themselves by trying to position G-Sync as superior, that you pay more money for a superior experience. But I think for the average gamer, FreeSync is going to be plenty.
Yeah, and with such sheer momentum behind FreeSync adoption, there's no way NVIDIA was ever going to compete with that. You know, as smart as they are with marketing, with AMD having the lion's share of just tech that's out there and adopted, when you consider graphics cards, APUs, laptops, consoles, and all that stuff, that's why FreeSync is so widely adopted, for one. So there's just nothing they can do to compete with that. Period.
And when you add on top of that the fact that they basically again, that's the AMD semi-custom strategy coming in and getting them the win because they're using an open source standard, because they were able to get FreeSync adopted by the VESA working group as the standard for DisplayPort 1.4. That basically they were able to, which admittedly the VESA adaptive sync standard is very vague, but the fact that FreeSync basically became the standard for the industry was not just a PR coup for them, but it basically helped cement their technology as the one everyone looked to as a base. And when it's free,
right.
When it's free and open source, a lot of people like free and open source.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the reason Mantle became Vulkan, right?
Yeah.
So we have plenty of links in the show notes that we have linked in the description below this video that detail, how you can get G-Sync enabled on your monitor if you have an adaptive sync monitor and you have an NVIDIA graphics card. But you know what? Unless you have anything else to add, Hunter, I think that covers the topic pretty thoroughly.
Oh, yeah, that covers it. I don't have anything else.
Great job, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job compiling that list. And also, thank you for finding several of these tech deals. In fact, one of them I plan on taking advantage of myself. But we'll get to that one in a minute. So I'm going to do these slightly out of order. The first one is for the PowerColor Red Dragon RX 570 4 gig. We've mentioned the RX 570 is the deal right now for people looking to get into PC gaming because it is a card that can handle 1080p high settings for less than $150. And that's still true for this card.
Buttery smooth gameplay too, man.
Yeah, the PowerColor Red Dragon RX 570 4 gig. It's currently on sale on Newegg for $144.99. $145 gets you a 4 gig RX 570, and it comes with 2 free games to boot.
That's good. And 4 gig is enough to do VR.
Yeah,
that's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yep, you have to have 4 gigs. So the 1063 gig can't do it, which is funny.
And so the RX 570, it does come with your choice of 2 of 3 games. The 3 games that are in the bundle, if I remember correctly, are Tom Clancy's The Division 2, Devil May Cry 5, and the remake of Resident Evil 2.
Which, that looks amazing. That I'm really looking forward to getting that thing.
Which, if you're interested in that, you can download the one-shot demo on Steam.
Oh, nice.
Green Man's got it on sale. Ooh, I need to. Yeah, I forgot about that.
But if you don't want to have to choose which of those 3 games you'd like to have access to, you could just buy yourself a PowerColor Red Dragon RX Vega 56 for $339.
That thing is a baller card, man. That thing will boost to 1600 megahertz all day long.
Well, the official boost clock is 1478 megahertz, but you're the guy who's the expert with the Vega 56, Jason. I trust your opinion. Plus, this comes with all 3 of those games I mentioned just a few moments ago.
Yep.
At a
yep.
$150 value, $150 value.
These things are known to boost up to 1600 megahertz, no problem. and usually overclock. You can usually overclock the RAM from 800 to 900 megahertz, which at that clock speed for the GPU does net you really, really good performance benefit. Like you're getting super scarily close to Vega 64 performance, if not surpassing it. Yeah. That is a great card, especially at that price point.
So you have two excellent Radeon options this week. Unfortunately, didn't find any real deals on NVIDIA cards, even on the 10 series. The 10 series supply is slowly dwindling.
Mm-hmm.
And so while that happens, the prices are kind of mediocre. You can find an EVGA overclocked RTX 2060 Ultra XC for $370, but that is $20 over the MSRP. So that's why I said, deal isn't quite there. But if you are looking for a deal and you need a dependable power supply for your machine, then thanks to Hunter for finding this one on Slick Deals. The EVGA 600B, which is an 80-plus bronze power supply with a 600-watt capacity, is $29.99 with free expedited shipping from B&H Photo.
That's a heck of a deal.
And you can get its slightly more powerful brother, the EVGA 700BR, which is a 700-watt, 80-plus bronze power supply for $39.99. So $30 gets you 600 watts, $40 gets you 700 watts. It's 80-plus bronze, which means it's at least 82% efficient at 50% load.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure these aren't modular, but
No, they're non-modular.
But I mean, it's a single 12-volt rail, you know, and they're quiet and they're good quality.
Yeah. EVGA does have good power supplies. I've heard a lot of good reviews on them.
Yep. I'm almost getting to a point where I swear by them now, honestly.
This would be good for somebody who, of course, doesn't want to pay a lot for a power supply and doesn't mind stuffing the cables, extra cables, in a hard drive cage or hard drive bay or somewhere. I personally would prefer at least a semi-modular power supply. That way I don't have to find somewhere to put unused cables.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. I would rather go with a good price modular power, fully modular. But if the price doesn't work, I would rather go with a semi.
Well,
Depends
this is kind of yeah. Go ahead.
This is $30. That's
Yeah.
stupid cheap.
Well, this is where you're getting to a point where, like, you know, you get that $50. Well, let me rephrase. This is where you're getting to like that $750, you know, mid-range build where you're trying to shoehorn in like a RX 588 gig and say maybe a 2600 or like a Ryzen 5 2600, an aftermarket cooler, you know, and then you're going after like the $50 Fantex case that's got really good cable management. And then, oh my gosh, I forgot to budget a power supply. Like,
right,
where you're getting to a point where like every dollar counts. You know what I mean? So,
and speaking of making every dollar count, if you're looking for 480 gigabytes of storage for dirt cheap, then you'd be hard pressed to do better than this Patriot Burst 2.5-inch SATA 3 SSD for $49.99.
Mm-hmm.
500 gigs of storage for have 500 gigs of SSD storage for right around $50. That's a very hard deal to beat.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer, and Patriot's got a good reputation for quality.
And it's got good reads and writes. Max sequential read up to 560 megabytes per second, and write is up to 540. That's pretty good. That's what I would definitely consider getting if I needed one.
Yeah.
And this is nice. 425 terabytes written write endurance.
Oh,
so that means you could write this drive full 850 times over, roughly, and it'll still keep going. That's
Nice.
the guarantee on it.
Oh, it's more than that, isn't it?
Well, 425 terabytes written, 480 gigabyte drive.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll call it 500 gigs to make the math simple. That means for each terabyte written, you'd write the entire drive over twice.
Oh, right. Okay, never mind.
And so that means 425 terabytes written, you could write the drive over 850 times, and it still operate. Notice also it's using the Phison S11 controller. That is a budget tier controller, but it is a solid one.
That's a good find.
And last but not least, actually, these last 3 deals you could put together to almost have a full system. This is a combo deal from Newegg. I don't know how long this particular combo is active, but if you're seeing this right after this video releases, you can get a Ryzen 5 2400G with a Gigabyte B450 Aorus Pro Wi-Fi motherboard, which is a solid B450 ATX motherboard, for $235.
That's a heck of a deal.
Yeah,
That's a heck of a deal.
Especially since that board has Wi-Fi. That's really good for people like me who need a Wi-Fi board.
Yeah, it does have built-in Wi-Fi, and it is AC Wi-Fi, so
that's good.
You don't need a separate adapter.
Well, and it's 4-phase VRM too. That's a solid board.
So you buy this 2500 or 2400G and the B450 motherboard with this Patriot 480 gig SSD and this 600 watt power supply. Throw in roughly another $100 for 16 gigs of DDR4 3000, and say $50 for that Fantex case you were talking about, Jason.
Yep.
And the
voila, you have a solid machine.
The Team Force, the Team T-Force Vulcan 16 gig 3000 megahertz is still $99.99.
It's not bad.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
Okay. Let's stop sharing that so we can see our faces again.
What?
Where'd my face go?
And so, with that, we've reached the end of our notes for the evening. But, gentlemen, do you have anything else you'd like to discuss or add?
Yeah, so apparently, we found this out recently. Apparently, amazing cyborg Protoss warriors that are cybernetic don't like spicy food. It's a bunch of silly hippie stuff.
For those who... I'll let Hunter explain that reference.
It burns.
It burns.
I think... possible... Well, yeah. I wonder if the shield, because it depends... whoa. I wonder if the acid reflux would deplete the shield at some point. Because all the Protoss units have a shield until it's depleted.
You know what would be messed up? Is if it actually recharged the shield. So you would have to go through all this like anguish and stress to vomit your lunch up. That probably was tasting really good. And then it just like supercharges your shield.
That would be hilarious.
So, you know, for that poor Protoss, he goes into battle like, blessed battle kind of thing. But he knows, man, I know I've got to go into battle. And I know that I'm gonna die a warrior's death, but I need to go out with a bang of glory. I gotta throw up my lunch, man.
I think what I know it would be is the Zerg, whatever, Zerg tenders or whatever, because they do have, well.
Oh yeah, Zergling tenders.
Yeah, Zerg food would would give you acid reflux.
But yeah, you know what? If anything's gonna give a Protoss cyborg warrior some acid reflux, it would be some Zerg tenders, man.
Yep. Or
That's
a
a
Zerg
good call.
burger. A Zerg burger sounds like a better name. And that I can see. The funny thing about that is in some of the maps, at least the Terran map, you do see like it's not a structure, it's an image on the map of a burger joint.
That's awesome.
Which I thought hilarious.
So if it is a Zerg burger, is it then just a Zerger?
Oh my God. Really? You just went there.
Of course I did, because this is the type of incisive commentary you come here for, ladies and gentlemen. All right. I think before the silliness gets any worse, we're going to have to call it a show. But if you've enjoyed this content, silly as it may have been, of course, you can tune in every week as we do this type of absolutely revelatory commentary on tech and hardware and even Protoss dietary habits. And so, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here,
we got to keep it a family show, right? So,
yeah, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here, there's a whole playlist where you can go back and see all of our silliness. And I'd just like to thank you for keeping up with us so far. And remember, when life has you down, Jesus loves you. And forge on.
Yep, forge on.